Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Warwick F1 show. Episode 52 is where we are at because we have just got the preview to do for Qatar. And then on the Losail circuit, this could be the home ground to essentially what could be the end of this Drivers' World Championship, because Lando Norris has the opportunity in his hands here to clinch his first ever driver's title ahead of Verstappen and Piastri. He currently sits with a 24-point lead at the top of the championship table, with a result all he needs to do is outscore both his teammate and Verstappen by 2 points, and he is going to be our drivers' world champion. It's going to be up to Verstappen and Piastri to prevent that from happening. But ultimately, if Verstappen wins both of these races and stuff goes his way, very much possibility. Exactly the same thing with Piastri, because they're both level on points. So this could be a very interesting weekend. It's also a sprint weekend, which means more opportunities for them to tangle, more opportunities for them to battle, and that's always a good thing. My name is Anwar. I'm going to be hosting this episode. I'm once again joined by Daniel. So thank you very much for joining me, my fellow co-host. Let's start with, we've just come off the bat of Las Vegas. McLaren have had a double DSQ, because of the floor wear. Do you think this is something that will weigh and have an impact on what we see this weekend?
If you believe the team, then no. But of course they're going to say that. They wouldn't say anything else. If they're not very competitive in Qatar, you can bet that Lando Norris is going to say, we just weren't going to be very competitive here anyway. Personally, I don't think it'll have too much of an impact. I mentioned it in the Vegas review. I don't think it's the kind of circuit where plank wear is such a huge issue. I don't think we've seen any disqualifications here in the past for that reason. Norris was asked on media day, actually, if McLaren are going to have to lift the car and will go slower as a result. And he said maybe they'll be quicker because he won't have to back off all the time. Which you could perceive as joking through the pain of disqualification and being hunted down by Max Verstappen in the championship. Or, it's a way of saying, no, we're going to be fine. Obviously, Andrea Stella has said that they took excessive risk in Vegas, which you'd have to agree with. But do they have to take those risks to make sure that they're not swallowed up by the likes of Mercedes and Ferrari if we're saying that Verstappen's going to get that top step of the podium, and then McLaren are left as food for the wolves, basically, for the closing pack to come in and swallow them up? I think Norris just needs to target a podium. If he can finish on the podium in the sprint and the Grand Prix, he's won it. Wait, is that true? I don't know. Anyway,
no, it wouldn't be.
Yeah, no, I was getting confused. I was thinking like in the podium.
It would have to be podiums in both races, both Grand Prix.
Yes. Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah. Okay. But, that's entirely possible that he can get a podium in all of the remaining races in the season, and then he's fine. But I think it's Piastri who's going to be more concerned about getting back on top of his form coming into this weekend and just focus on personal progression instead of making the car as fast as possible. I think it's important for Oscar to make sure he's working at his best, because obviously he's had, Norris had 4 podiums in a row. It was going to be 5 in Vegas before the disqualification, and Piastri hasn't been on the podium for any of them. So he wants to get that duck off his back.
I think with Piastri, in terms of the attitude that he's had, I think there's recognition from him that stuff hasn't gone his way, and it is ultimately now a long shot. I think that's what he described it as in terms of winning this World Championship. He's kept the door open. He has mentioned that it's been done before, but he recognises it, so it's difficult. I think, like you mentioned, he just needs to go for personal growth and see where that ends up, because he's obviously in a rotten ditch when it comes to his form. It's no podium since Monza is honestly no podium since Monza is probably right, and that's a massive disappointment, right? You got a McLaren car that has looked the most competitive over the course of the season. The fact that that is the statistic, that is pretty a bad look on him. So as long as he gets on the podium here and maybe in Abu Dhabi as well, I think for him he needs to take that confidence and run, because it's been a really poor end to the season. Maybe that's historically based as well in terms of the fact that he has generally struggled to come at the season end. At the same time, this is a track that he's liked before. He got his first sprint win in his career, which was the first time he stepped on the top step of the podium, I guess, even though it was a sprint race. So he likes this track. He's got an affinity to it. If there was ever a place for him to recover the form that we've seen at the start of the season, I think you'd put down Qatar as a good bet for that. Do you agree with that, Daniel, or not?
Yeah, for Piastri personally, I think it's a good opportunity to go again. He's finished ahead of Norris very often at Qatar when they've been racing, so I think it's somewhere that he likes. Maybe we get to see whether it is an end of season thing or just the end of season tracks that he's kind of fallen out of favor with. If it's an end of season thing, then the slump may continue, although I'd argue recently it's been more bad luck, but you know what I mean in that, if it's just the tracks, then we should see him come good again at this circuit. After Vegas, it was difficult to see Piastri so crestfallen. He was kind of laughing, but in a painful kind of way. It's like the kind of thing you'd kind of expect from a Ferrari driver if after a tough race or something, is that kind of disappointment in his eyes, his face, his voice, all of it, the whole body language. Really, it was tough to see. So I want him to succeed. He said he doesn't really need a reset coming into this weekend. He just needs to keep going and get some positive momentum. But like we've mentioned, it's if the McLaren car can provide them with what they need. Obviously, it's a sprint weekend as well. In fact, you know what? Let's have a wet FP1 so that in Qatar, yes, I know, it's so that none of the teams know what setup they're going to use. I know the forecasts are showing 0% chance of precipitation in Qatar, but surely, come on, racing gods, you can provide
this
some.
This is the type of insight you get at the Warwick F1 show, because no other podcast is talking about the rain in Qatar.
We need some championship lols, so I'm willing to do a rain dance for everyone for FP1 only, so that they have little representation, and we get some wacky setups going into the sprint.
Yeah, some wacky setups and some wacky results as a result if that happened. Spoiler alert, I think it's really unlikely to see any wet weather in Qatar, but we can hope for sure. Now, let's talk about the pecking order, because we've had a weekend where we kind of didn't expect McLaren to be up there, and they kind of were. Admittedly, not in the standings at the end because of the DSQ, but they seem okay in terms of competitiveness on a track that they've never really been competitive on. Is this going to be a shootout between the two McLarens and Verstappen, or do you expect another team to enter the fray?
Yeah, Max is very successful at this circuit as well. Obviously, 2 Grand Prix wins and a sprint. No, not a sprint. So he's just great at this circuit. Obviously, it's full of medium to high-speed corners, which is where Max thrives anyway. And it's been the Red Bull's strength the past few years. So he's just he's just great there. But also last year at Qatar, it was one of those weekends that we had in 2024, and a couple of this year as well, where Red Bull just seemed to turn the car around, not overnight, but because they couldn't do that because of Parc Fermé, but between the sprint and qualifying, they seemed to make changes that allowed them to unlock performance to let them win, basically. He finished the sprint 8th last year behind Hulkenberg in a Haas. His car was undrivable, horrific oversteer. And then come Grand Prix qualifying just a few hours later, he qualifies on pole. He gets a one-place grid penalty and threatens to endanger the life of George Russell, if you remember that beef at turn 1. But just takes the lead instead and just runs away with it, has the pace to win, to be honest. So that's based on recent evidence, what he can achieve. Obviously, the circumstances are very different coming into this year. He did have a challenge from Norris last year, of course. Maybe it will be similar this year. Hopefully Norris won't be speeding through any yellow flag sectors like he was last year and get a 10-second stop-go penalty, which was very disappointing for our fight for the lead. But there we are. The rules are rules, I guess. And I expect it to be a shootout between those two specifically. And like I said, if Piastri can get up there, it'll be good for us to watch.
Yeah, I want to see those three go battle together. I don't think we've seen that enough. And I think the cars should be close enough for it to really materialize in that way. I also agree with you in the sense of I don't really see the Mercs or the Ferraris. Yeah, I mean, we don't really have any faith in Ferrari anymore, but still worth us referring to them here. It seems like it's a bit of a bridge too far in that sense, in terms of seeing those guys get into the battle and get into the mixer. So I think it will just be those three cars, the two McLarens and Max Verstappen, because I think those three just will have the absolute pace. Now, pace is one thing, but we also need tyres, because tyre wear is a big deal in Formula One. And we have a set tyre lap limit for this race as a result of concerns for tyre wear. Now, we've had issues here before with tyres, and we have had a limit on stint length before. But this weekend, we're going to see a maximum stint length of 25 laps, which forces it to be at least a two-stop strategy for every team involved. How do you think that will affect things, Daniel? And is there any team, I guess you might say McLaren here, who will have or will stand to gain from this type of thing?
I don't know if I'll say McLaren. I think tyre management is kind of their strength, and when you don't need to manage the tyres so much because you can get a fresh pair every 25 laps, I don't think it'll be so much of a strength that will play into their hands. I think it's probably more Red Bull, to be honest, and Max's hands even more. I will say, firstly, this has happened before, obviously, in 2023. The lap limit was 18, which made it a mandatory 3-stop race. Now, obviously, it's a 25 lap limit, so there's progress there. And then you get the question of, is it necessary? So on 2 out of the last 4 visits to the Losail International Circuit, where we haven't had mandated tyre stint lengths, so in last year and 2021, we have had punctures during those races. 2021 was unquestionably down to the, those triangle pyramid curbs that they have that are really serrated for the purpose of because obviously it's mostly a motorbike circuit, Qatar, in Qatar. But, last year's punctures, they were surely caused by the mirror that flew off Alex Albon's car, if you remember, landed onto the track at turn 1, and then was not recovered by marshals under a virtual safety car or anything. And it was then hit by Bottas, promptly exploding it into about 1,000 shards of glass and carbon fiber. And lo and behold, Sainz and Hamilton have punctures in the coming laps. Coincidence? I think not. So, was it the tyre?
Not.
Definitely not. I know not. So was it the tyre compounds and their wear that caused the punctures last year? Probably not. But then again, Pirelli have said that they've analysed last year's compounds and the left front tyre had reached the maximum wear level. So I understand their risk aversion, especially given 2021. Maybe last year we were just lucky not to have any punctures, right? Because of tyre wear. So I do understand it. The high lateral energy that goes through the tyres. Obviously, it is high stress for the tyres because of the number of medium high-speed corners, but also it's just really hot. So the thermal degradation is huge as well. And the fatigue of the tyre construction can lead to them giving up. So, yeah, it's probably a mixture of factors. But it's something that we're no stranger to in Qatar, let's say.
No stranger indeed. Now let's talk about the midfield battle and a few of the other championship battles that are worth talking about outside of the title, I guess. Some of the lesser kind of accolades, because there is currently a battle in the Constructors' Championship between the Red Bull of basically Verstappen on his own versus the Ferrari team, who've just chronically underperformed. There's only 13 points in it. Who do you think has the upper hand over the course of this? Naturally, Ferrari have 2 drivers who are contributing. Verstappen is just on his lonesome, let's be honest. And Red Bull are the ones with a slender 13-point advantage, but could be said that Verstappen has a pace advantage over those Ferraris over the next 2. Do you think that it will stay this way in terms of Red Bull staying ahead of Ferrari, or do you think this is something that's going to reverse?
I have faith in Red Bull to stay ahead of Ferrari, actually, mostly because I anticipate Verstappen to be in the fight for the win. And obviously, if you're winning, then that's a huge points gap that you're putting on everyone else, regardless of where your second driver comes. Obviously, it depends on where Ferrari finish in the race, but a 7-point gap is still going to contribute a lot to being able to put points on Ferrari. The gap's 13 points at the moment between Red Bull and Ferrari in third and fourth. So I think Red Bull might be able to do that. But also, I don't think that it's not a given that Ferrari are going to have two drivers contributing this weekend. Because if you look at Hamilton's track record around Qatar, it's not been great. I mean, he did win the race there in 2021, but in the last 2 years, I mean, they've just been dreadful. In 2023, I'm sure many people remember, it was the race where Hamilton actually turned in on Russell at turn one, taking himself out of the race. He kind of closed the door on the outside and they both went off. Russell was able to continue, Hamilton wasn't. Last year was not quite as bad, but really not great at all. He qualified 4 positions below his teammate and then jumped the start, which was a penalty. Then he had a puncture, which wasn't his fault, just unlucky there. And then he had a drive-through penalty for speeding in the pit lane, which was just a clumsy mistake. So I'm really not expecting a great weekend from him here either. And especially given Ferrari's possible lack of competitiveness, no one really knows, but that's, the perception in the weekend. I don't think he's going to be up in the high points. And, when you look in the context of this season as well, it's entirely possible that he has just as much of a stinker. So I don't want to see it, of course, but, realistically, I don't think we can expect great things from Ferrari or Hamilton this weekend. He said he's not looking forward to the next 2 rounds or next season, which he admitted afterwards was a heat of the moment thing. But I think he's just down, and that's obviously playing on his mind in the car as well.
I think it's very natural to be down because I think he will be very disappointed about how far away from it he is versus Leclerc, because Lewis hasn't got a podium yet this season. Leclerc's got 7 of them. There's about a 74-point advantage between the 2 Ferraris, which is essentially it's a drubbing, isn't it? Leclerc's wiped the floor with Lewis, and I don't imagine everyone's got an ego, right? I don't imagine Lewis is probably very happy about that, in all honesty. So it makes sense that he has the attitude he has, but I want to start seeing results because we've seen this attitude for quite a while now, and I'd like him to at least be competitive against his teammate this weekend. That's what I'm hoping for, at least. Whether that happens is a different story entirely. Now, there is another Constructors' battle just worth talking about, and we'll just drop this one in. The lower echelons of the Constructors' Championship, Piastri on 73 points in 7th, Aston Martin on 72, 1 behind in 8th, and Sauber are only on 68, which is 5 points behind Haas in 7th. Now, there's a lot of money that goes into these Constructors' Championship numbers. There's millions of pounds that is the difference between finishing 8th and 9th, respectively. Do you think it is a case of we just need one big result out of any of these 3 to spiral them back to essentially rocket them to that 7th place? Because I imagine those are the 3 teams eyeing up that position in the Constructors.
Yeah, I mean, they just need an Alpine double podium from last year in Brazil and they'll be set, really. That's probably too much of an ask for the teams in 7th, 8th and 9th in the Constructors, but you never know. I think Sauber are actually pretty well placed for this. We've got Hulkenberg on good form. Actually, Bortoleto is not very well, on great form at all. But, I don't see Aston Martin being great this weekend. They've just not been very competitive recently at all, and they've kind of fallen back. Obviously, a P9 finish for them, being as big a team as they are, would be disastrous. But yeah, it's kind of crazy with Sauber, isn't it? This time last year, they'd only, after the Qatar Grand Prix, round 22 of 24, as it was then, or 23, I think it was actually, they'd only just scored their first points of the season with Zhou Guanyu, who then earned the nickname Zhoumacher, which I think is really an evil pun. But yeah, now they have 68 points in the podium and they're only 5 points off P7 in the standings. So from a story perspective, I'd like to see Sauber at least get close in this weekend and take the fight to Haas. But then again, like we've said, Ollie Behrman's on great form. So, he's been putting in great performances for that team. So I think he's going to be a tough barrier as well to the points.
Yeah, but Behrman's in a very good rich vein of form in the same way a few others are, like Carlos Sainz's and like Kimi Antonelli as well. But it's time to move to our prediction segment of the show because we've kind of previewed any of the main storylines this weekend. We're not really going to talk about the Adrian Newey news as of yet. That's not going to really matter on this weekend. We'll talk about that later in a news episode. Don't you worry about that. Right, so let's go to our prediction segment. We're going to do our sprint win for top 5 positions, DNF, and random predictions. So, Danny, you kicked us off when we did predictions last time around. So I'm going to kick us off. All right. So my sprint win this weekend will be Lando Norris. And I think he goes and wins the title this weekend because I think he'll also win the race as well. I think that Verstappen will be in second, but I don't think this is going to be a contest. And Oscar Piastri will get his first podium, but he will be sitting on the podium while seeing his teammate celebrate the World Championship. In P4, I've gone with Kimi Antonelli because I think he's in a good run of form and I think he can continue. And in 5th, I'm going to go with George Russell, who will probably be in touch and distance between Antonelli and himself. But no real massive surprise or curveballs in my top 5. How about yours, Daniel?
Okay. Interesting predictions. I've gone for Verstappen as a sprint winner. I don't think Lando Norris is going to wrap up the championship this weekend. I've put Oscar Piastri as the winner of the Qatar Grand Prix from Max Verstappen, who's going to settle for P2. And then we've got Norris coming in P3. I couldn't justify putting him off the podium for a second weekend in a row. I got lucky last time. And George Russell finishing just outside the podium positions. I wanted to put him in the top 3 because I feel like he's been really aggressive around Qatar in the past, and he's been a really great racer. We've seen some great battles. Turn 1 especially has thrown up delight after delight, and Russell's been a part of a few of them. But, I don't think they'll have the pace. And P5 is the typical rogue midfield top 5 finish. I've gone for Behrman. On the hype train, I think he's doing great, and he will continue to do great, frankly.
Yeah, I don't see a reason why not. He's in a good run of form, and I think that 5th place is always up for grabs at the end of it. So let me go through Lucy's as well. She also believes Piastri will get a win, but instead of using the real win to go on the Grand Prix Sunday, she said Piastri wins the sprint. She thinks Verstappen will be the person to take home the victory on the Sunday, followed by Oscar Piastri. He then says George Russell in 3rd, and then Leclerc in 4th, which is the only Ferrari that we've got in our top 5s. And she decides to put Lando Norris in 5th in a result that probably is something that would put a lot of pressure on him going into the last weekend, because he would have dropped 10 points at a minimum to Verstappen, and at a minimum would have dropped 9 points, including the sprint, to his teammate Oscar Piastri, which would be less than ideal. But I think there's a little bit of no, I don't even think it would be hopium. I think this is an interesting set. But we've all got different winners for this race, which is really interesting. We've also got all different sprint winners as well, which is also kind of fun to see. Let's go through the DNF, shall we? I am going to start, and once again, shock horror, it's going to be a rookie again. Now, what rookie are you going to say? I'm going to say this is not going to be anyone's fault necessarily. I think this is just going to be a mechanical. So in some ways, I'm not really bullying a rookie. I'm saying Isaac Hadjar. I think he's due a retirement. It's been quite a while for him, I think. My random prediction is we're going to see 2 punctures. And I'm not going to confirm whether that's going to be tire related or just contact related. But I think we're going to see a little bit of argy-bargy, put it that way, over the course of the Sunday. How about you, Danny? What's your DNF and random prediction?
Yeah, of course. You're right, by the way. Isaac Hadjar hasn't had a DNF since Silverstone, so yeah, maybe he's due one. He's only had 1 DNF all season, to be honest. The Australia incident counting as a DNS, of course, so he's narrowly escaped that stat. So yeah, maybe perhaps even the least DNFE rookie this season, but don't take
definitely right.
I think really so.
I don't think any of the others would have retired less.
Did Doohan have more than one? Because he only did about 6 races.
Doohan doesn't count. He's been here for like 5 minutes.
He was there. Oh no, he still had 2. He still had 2 DNFs. Oh no, poor guy. We're laughing at him. Yeah, he started his career with a DNF and ended it with a DNF. So going out with a bang, I think you could call that. Okay. Yeah, it is. DNF, I've put Lance Stroll, actually. It was his first DNF of the season in Vegas, of course. And I don't know, like trying to get a bus from the university interchange, you kind of wait forever for one and then 2 are going to come along at the same time. It's the same for DNFs with Lance Stroll. This race, of course, if you remember 2023, he stirred up some controversy by kind of shoving his trainer after he got eliminated in Q1. There was a lot made of that. So maybe a repeat of his rage this weekend for some reason. And my random prediction is that a driver will pull off a 4-stop race, which, of course, they're kind of halving the mandatory stint length with that. They're kind of going like every 12 and a half laps or something. They get a box. I don't know why. I just thought, the mandatory 2 and then maybe damage results in pitting for some reason. And then if they have to go through the pit lane for another reason, maybe just, I don't know, the safety car goes through there for some reason. We saw that when they were picking up the pieces of the mirror debris. Maybe they have to go through the pit lane again because of damage. So, yeah, that was my flawed logic and reasoning for my DNF and random prediction. And finally, what about Lucy's?
Cool. Lucy's ones are pretty normal. She said that life has been too good recently, so she's gone for Carlos Sainz DNF. And you know what? I like the fact that she's trying to get ahead of the good luck, because sometimes you have good form and it just surprises you. She's trying to beat that surprise. And I've got a lot of respect for that. And her random prediction is a DNF in both sprint and race, which is the same thing that Bortoleto did in Brazil. That seems relatively reasonable as a random prediction. I did recognise that it was the last sprint race where this happened, but at the same time, it can't be that bad, can you? It can't be that. It can't happen twice.
Surely not to Bortoleto. Maybe to someone else. I don't know when the last time it happened.
Maybe someone else.
Yeah, it seems quite rare, to be honest. So I'm happy with that.
So am I. We'll keep it stepping there. I'm happy with that. But that's our prediction segment, and that's our preview episode all done. I want to thank you guys very much for listening and watching from your seats at home. Thank you, Daniel, for joining me to co-host this episode. We'll be back at some point next week to unpack and delve into what really happened and maybe talk about who has become the Drivers' World Champion in the 2025 Formula One season. So until then, goodbye.